Salams, you're watching People's Dispatch, and this is the Daily Debrief coming to you from our studios here in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani, and on the show today, it's been a busy day around the world, and Prabir Prakash, our Newsclick's editor-in-chief, joins us to talk about all the rhetoric and diplomatic back and forth over the past few days, including, of course, Joe Biden's visit to Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's State of the Union speech, the role of China, India, and other countries whose interests also lie in an end to the war in Europe, and a couple of other bits here and there. After that, we'll be joined by Dr. Abdul Rahman for an honest analysis of the United Nations Security Council's take on Israeli settlements in the occupied territory. First up, Joe Biden has arrived in Poland after a trip to Ukraine shrouded in secrecy, which even Moscow was apparently apprised of just hours before the U.S. president departed Washington, D.C. Biden handed out another $500 million in aid and used some strong language in framing his side's role in the war in Ukraine. He framed it as a battle for democracy. The visit comes just after the Munich Security Conference, where the headline was further escalation of the United States' trade and diplomatic war with China. As Biden was in Poland, the top Chinese diplomat was in Moscow. China maintains, of course, that it is an observer to the conflict and only interested in finding a way towards peace, which puts it firmly in the United States' crosshairs and potentially can lead to bipartisan support for more arms and money, of course, pouring into Ukraine. And shortly before we came into studios, Russian President Vladimir Putin also made a nearly 2-hour-long speech to the Russian parliament. The State of the Nation address blamed the U.S. and NATO for starting the war and called them cynical and stupid, while also announcing that Russia would no longer participate in the New START treaty, which has of course been in force since 2011. Prabir is in studio to talk about all of this, all of the goings on, all of the rhetoric, all of the back and forth over the past few days, and to give us a sense of actually what to make of all of it. Prabir, good to have you back in the studio. I think we can start with what is the most sort of immediate of events, which is Putin's speech, State of the Union sort of address, in which, among many things, it's an almost 2-hour-long speech, he has said that Russia will now suspend participation in New START. What are the implications of this quite serious step that Russia will now take?
If you remember, this was in fact Trump who started the issue of the START extension, saying we will not extend START, and there was a possibility that START would end in 2021. Unfortunately for the world, and I do think it's very fortunate, we still have at least one arms control agreement because all others have fallen by the wayside. Bush pulled out of the ABM treaty, then intermediate range ballistic missile treaty was also abandoned by Trump, and the old START, which is really what we have now, is the only treaty which is left in place. That how much nuclear weapons should each country have, how they should dismantle it further, etc., etc. Now, this was frozen during Trump's period, and 2021, Biden extended it because there was no time for a negotiation of extension of the START. Therefore, extended it. The provision exists till 2026. But now it appears that Russia is saying that, well, if we are already at war, which is what is being, as we have discussed earlier, this is really NATO and Russia fighting a war in Ukraine. Therefore, does the New START have any meaning? And given the fact that already a further ratcheting up of tension is taking place, there is now talk of, after the tanks, which itself was one step towards war directly with Russia, the next step is really the giving fighter aircraft. In the midst of this, we also have information which has now become public, which we expected was going to be there anyway, that the HIMARS and other missile attacks which Ukraine uses against Russian troops, the entire coordinates and the where it should strike and when it should strike, all of it is done by essentially NATO. And it's only the physically, the weapon is there. It's physically, the button may be pressed by an Ukrainian. But for all practical purposes, the where it should hit, what are the coordinates, how it should hit, all of it is done essentially by NATO. This is what the Ukrainians have said, because when they asked for longer range missiles, at that point the question was you might strike into Russia and trigger a war. They said we can't because you control the entire process. Okay, Now that was quite shocker, because till now there was plausible deniability. Though people were saying obviously they get the coordinates, the space satellites, etc. All of that is used to spot where the missiles are, where the installations are, and that's fed into the HIMARS, which then go and strike the place. All of it was actually being discussed. But this is an official statement by the Ukrainians that this is what's really been happening. Now that official meaning, the Washington Post writing about it, others writing about it, will take it as official. So given that this has been already a war in which NATO is a participant not only in supplying arms and ammunition, but also in this way. So given that, if you give now aircraft, clearly who will control the aircraft? Who will be the pilots in the aircraft? Will it be other countries volunteering to send pilots to be shot down, or it would be the NATO itself? All these are questions.
Yeah.
And if it strikes deep into Russian territory, as Ukraine wants to do, at least Crimea, then what would be the response? And I think today Putin has also said that we'll respond militarily. If you give further arms, which the way it is phrased, to me it appears to be missiles which can strike deep into Russia or Crimea, or if you give them aircraft, then we will respond militarily to the countries giving these arms.
Yeah.
So that's a statement which is really much more aggressive than what he has made till date. And of course, the withdrawal from the New START, which you talked about, which means we get into here trigger nuclear alerts post-2026. Of course, any country can get out of the START by declaring it that we're getting out of it. So that's how Trump did it, how George Bush did it with the earlier treaties. Well, that would mean that we are on the nuclear precipice. We already have been talking about it for quite some time, but this is really a declaration which makes it much more stark for everybody.
Much more real and stark, yeah. Praveen, so like you're saying, it's alarming not just for the belligerents in this conflict, but everyone else as well. And we'll talk a little bit later about the impact that the developing world has essentially faced out of this conflict. Often, as with most global crises, most of the burden comes to the global south. But before that, China has also now been, at least at a diplomatic level, dragged into sort of one side of the narrative. At the Munich Security Conference, Blinken made some statements. What do you make of this sort of two-pronged, U.S. diplomatic onslaught?
Well, whether we should call it diplomatic onslaught or not is the issue. Because what Blinken said was certainly not very diplomatic. He essentially said that if you give military aid to Russia, then we will sanction you. Now, you see, you're sanctioning a pure economic military power, at least a pure economic power by all accounts. And you are saying that you don't have the right to take an independent decision whom you will supply what, in spite of the fact that we, as countries, can supply Ukraine whatever we want.
Or anyone else
so,
for that matter.
So there is a complete asymmetry you're putting with yourself and with China, that you are not like us, you cannot give arms to who is fighting quote-unquote us, but we can give arms to those who are fighting against Russia. We have no such responsibility. So this was really war talk, and this after having cancelled the China visit on the basis of a balloon, which now Washington Post reluctantly says was probably a balloon which drifted over the United States, or that was not its original path. Now, the bad faith is claimed that after having drifted there, they still continued to surveil the American facilities. Now, in a balloon, you really don't have that kind of control. If you don't control the trajectory, what else do you control? I really don't know. And I don't think that they were sending, by all accounts, they had the ability to send all the information that gathering over there as it is being claimed back to China. And anyway, as we know, the Chinese have satellites over the United States, and the military-grade satellites have really ability to send pictures which are of grade that they probably can see even small objects over there. Large objects, forget it. So it doesn't seem that there is much mileage to the story. And but on that basis, Blinken didn't travel to China. There was no talks which were held. So the China tensions, China-US tensions continue to rise. There is no backing off by any party on this. So we are on multiple collision courses. I'm not going to include Iran at the moment on this. You have an Iran-Israel collision course over there. You have the backing of the United States to Israel. So all of that is now, all the hot spots, in fact, are going to be worsening. And that's the direction. But the world really doesn't want to go. But at the same time, nobody has the ability to intervene. The moral authority of even India post-independence regarding the Korean War, which you had both sides fights going on. China entering the war, Russia supporting China and North Korea, while the U.S. was a combatant over there. China and U.S. fought in that war on two sides. But at the time, there was at least a possibility of intervention by countries like India, for instance. We don't seem to see that today. And if anybody even dares to say it, Blinken has made it clear that they will be threatened with sanctions. Forget countries like India, smaller countries will not dare to open their mouth when you have China being threatened in this way. Because Wang Yi actually said we want to have a initiative for peace and we're going to talk about it in Munich. Didn't happen. With this, it sort of cleared the pitch immediately. So I think we are in for very dangerous times, and particularly with the way things are shaping up, we don't see any step back from any side.
Thanks very much for your time and for talking about actually quite a bit that we managed to cover today, but that's also because so much is going on that it warranted a bit of a longer conversation. Deep concern and dismay has been expressed by that body over Israel's settlement activity. But the Council watered down and issued a statement that replaced a draft resolution which would have expressly condemned Israeli policies. The UNSC's presidential statement was approved on Monday by all 15 members of the Council, including, of course, the United States. It said, I quote, "The Security Council reiterates that continuing Israeli settlement activities are dangerously imperiling the viability of the two-state solution based on 1967 lines." End quote. Abdul, straight up, because it is, after all, it's a political question. So what do you make of the final resolution that was passed versus perhaps the draft that was supposed to be up for discussion?
Well, there is a technical difference, of course. The so-called presidential statement, though it is rare, it has no legal value. It has no other political value also. It is a symbolic document. If it was a resolution, of course that would have been legally binding on the Security Council. There would have been some pressure to implement it. Whether they have, of course, they have passed resolutions in the past, but none of them have been implemented when it comes to Israel. But still, there is much more legal weightage when it comes, if it is a resolution. So that is one aspect of it. Of course, the text also. As per the reports, the text of the resolution was much more stronger, basically declaring all kinds of settlements again. Of course, the repetition that settlements are illegal and the international community takes the responsibility to remove all the illegal settlements from the occupied territories, saying that demolitions carried out by Israelis of Palestinian homes and other structures inside the occupied territories need to stop, and those are illegal acts. So all those things were there in a very strong worded form. That is not the case in the document. The document simply says that it basically all the members condemn whatever is happening, unilateral actions taken by Israel in the occupied territories. Those actions are not good for peace and blah, 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 which basically is basically repeating what from different forums, from across the period of the conflict, have been said many times. So exactly that is what has happened. Apart from that, if there was a resolution, there would have been pressure on all the permanent members, including the US, to vote on it. And that would have made a political statement. Even if the resolution would not have passed, because the US might have vetoed, that veto could have carried a political message vis-a-vis the larger world politics unfolding at the moment. That basically, that is also, and you can say, the US has been successful in avoiding that particular situation as well.
Okay. Abdul, are there some indications from at least what the official line of the United States is and its allies, Western powers particularly, indicate that there is some concern over how right-wing the current Israeli government is and the kind of expansion plans that, for example, we've discussed also on the show before that this government has?
Yeah, of course. The US has, in fact, Anthony Blinken went to Israel when the escalation happened earlier this month, basically in an attempt to pacify whatever was there. Of course, the Israelis are not willing to listen to it. In fact, after the presidential statement was adopted, Benjamin Netanyahu government said that this resolution is this statement is one-sided, and US should not have been part of this particular process, anti-Israeli process. So it seems that though the US is trying to, there is an attempt to save face, because of course, if you are part of the global politics where you are trying to mobilize world opinion against the Russian war in Ukraine, you cannot openly take a position against the occupation of Israel over Palestinians. So you want to make it a non-issue, you want to kind of keep it low, and that is all you can do, because it's a fact that US has been supporting the occupation in Palestine, but they don't want it to be the talking point at the moment. And that for that particular purpose, there is a consistent effort made by the Biden administration to basically make reduce the intensity of the conflict at the moment, so that it becomes less visible.
Right.
And all the efforts, if you see, are directed towards this particular objective. There is no attempt to find any solution. There is no attempt to initiate a peace talk at the moment. There is no attempt to give indication to Israel that such acts are unacceptable. So that is not the case. The case is to kind of make it a non-issue.
Under the carpet as much
Exactly.
as possible. All right, thanks very much for that update, Abdul. And with that also, we bring to a close this episode of the Daily Debrief. As always, we invite you to head to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, for more details on these stories and all of the other work we do. Also, don't forget to follow us on the social media platform of your choice. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.